After painful delays and a horde of leaks that I somehow managed to dodge, The Last of Us Part 2 is finally ready to pounce on us. Or at least it is in a week from now. Naughty Dog has sent out review code incredibly early, and I've had time to clock the game twice on Survivor and Survivor Plus difficulty. I could not be more prepared to unload my thoughts. We get to the guts of things pretty quickly on this channel, so here's the final verdict. Is The Last of Us Part 2 a game worth buying? Absolutely. Does it continue to elevate those impeccably high production standards one expects of a Naughty Dog title? Without a doubt. And here's the big question. Overall, does it go above and beyond to stand as an all-time masterpiece on par with the widely praised original? Let me just whisk you from a cliffhanger statement to instead talk about something that happened 7 years ago in your past. Something like, I don't know, a quick recap of 2013's The Last of Us. Why on earth would I disrupt the flow of what I was building back there? 2 reasons. It's a great opportunity to remind veterans of what's come before and to get newbies up to speed. But most importantly, we're doing things this way because I want to get you prepared for the narrative structure of this much more complex follow-up. That feeling that you're having right now of slight irritation? Hold on to it. You're going to feel it a few times before this game is done. The beloved original game used storytelling devices like flashbacks, rarely, and only in its 3rd act. Part 2 seems to love nothing better than to lead you to a climactic event before grabbing you by the scruff of the neck and just hurling you somewhere else. Sometimes you'll land days previous and suburbs away. Other times it's years distant and half an America away. Does Naughty Dog settle into a groove with it? We'll get to this. Eventually. For now, let's get this recap out of the way very, very quickly. The Last of Us was basically a road trip odyssey across a post-pandemic America as undertaken by Joel, a grizzled, morally dubious survivor, and Ellie, a plucky yet inexperienced teen. We soon learn that Ellie may in fact be the source of mankind's only cure for this awful fungus person nightmare that's killed millions, mutated just as many, and ruined mushrooms as a pizza topping for everybody. In the fullness of time, these two grow from being imperfect strangers to building a genuine father-daughter bond. Ellie effectively blooms into a tough-as-nails killer. Joel remembers he still has a heart and wants to live for something other than surviving. So strong is their bond, when the vaccine makers insist that there's no choice but to sacrifice Ellie, Joel slaughters his way to her, escapes, and lies to Ellie about what occurred during her unconsciousness. Does she buy any of that? Well, who knows? Because end credits. Long story short, The Last of Us was the 2nd best mushroom-induced trip most of us had ever been on. And just like the virus it depicted, it got under your skin quickly before blowing your mind out of your face. And you know what? I've spoken for too long. Let's break this up with a short bit of footage I've captured from a part of the game that Naughty Dog insists is spoiler-free. You'll find that I'll often shut up and sprinkle these short breaks of raw footage throughout this video. I've also segmented YouTube's progress bar down the bottom there, so you can find these bits and specific topics quickly. Some of these clips are stealth approach, some are hyper-aggressive, and others are a mix. All of them have enemies cranked to Survivor.
Right over here! God damn it!
So today, we're not even going to come close to covering the resolution to Joel's lie. I'm also not going to speak in depth about characters. On the screen now are the strict embargo terms I'm trying to work within. Basically, I'm planning to talk about some of the many themes in the game, the narrative structure of things, and obviously my reaction to everything as a whole. But yeah, even without these terms enforced on me, I would want to keep as vague as possible on the nitty-gritty anyway. One thing I can say right now is this is tonally darker, and the violence here doesn't so much get in your face as it does get inside your face. You'd be forgiven for thinking the original game was a hard-edged, hard-fought journey. I thought so too, but now I'm here to tell you that, compared to this, that game was a skip down Lollipop Lane. Do not go in expecting a continuation of a buddy road trip sprinkled with Ellie's best knock-knock jokes. We have shifted gears into a cautionary tale focused on the futile cycle of frontier justice and the avalanche of consequences that aren't far behind. Naughty Dog explores the concept of blind hate being a hard drug that has the potential to destroy the happiest parts of us, quicker than meth will your pearly whites.
Get her, girl!
Something else worth noting, The Last of Us dropped Joel's shocking decision late in the piece and prompted us all to have a bit of an ethical recap with ourselves after the credits. Part 2 opens up a bigger deck of moral conundrum cards much earlier on, and it asks you to have that internal debate with your conscience as you're on the run with your hand on the trigger. Often, the bad stuff are snap decisions made as people are trying to turn your head into a canoe. Sometimes not, and you know better. Either way, this game wants you on edge and evicted from any comfort zones you may have.
See anything? He's gotta be around here. When we find him, we should let the dogs have him.
Speaking of minimal comfort zones and a lack of safe spaces, there are practically no perfect hiding spots or infallible tactics to exploit in the combat encounters of this game. Naughty Dog has taken the existing, low resources, analog stealth framework and gone bigger in every way. In a physical sense, environments have grown into sprawling suburbs of combat puzzles, packed with enemies and structures to pick through or unleash these desperate guerrilla strikes from. Much like Uncharted 4, Naughty Dog has even threaded in a few isolated areas where the blinkers come right off, and you can just go galloping around looking for optional side dungeons. I probably wouldn't get too excited here, as these moments, along with some very Drake-esque action movie set pieces, are in painfully short supply.
And he's still moving? Nope. You know what? I'm impressed with us. Yeah. Man, the guys are not gonna believe our numbers.
Part 2 is chunkier in the enemy roster too. Some packs of infected have evolved even further towards velociraptor cunning, while others have gone gargantuan and can spew area of denial acid. Worse, your human enemies now come in two flavours: attack dog happy militia, trained to sweep areas, and then there are these religious stealth experts who employ a whistle language. If these bastards are not Robin Hooding you from the trees, they're bum rushing with farming implements and trying to install a blowhole in your head. The inclusion of long grass, vehicles to shelter beneath, and just the prone mechanic in general opens up a ton of tactical options. Frankly, you'll need the extra creativity because dogs will follow your stink lines back to you, and enemies in general are way more cluey, they just coordinate and communicate more believably.
Brooke! Pin her down!
There's also a sense that when you kill their mates, they become more cautious or outright pissed off. This adds so much to the experience, and your guilt levels. Honestly, the bread and butter combat puzzle gameplay here is brilliant stuff that's absolutely edge of your seat. These intense encounters won't ever go the same way twice, and you'll gladly invest time scrounging in the slower, non-combat areas for any crafting materials. Basically anything that can give you an edge when it's on for young and old. Even a single bullet can be what saves your ass.
Hold the perimeter until we hear otherwise. Keep an eye out in case he comes his way.
I got something.
Infected?
Let's get in there. Okay, girl. You think this guy's infected?
I think he came from over there. Right over there!
Bouncing off that concept, brawling has been enhanced and given much greater importance. Expect to click empty and then sprint into these super personal, all or nothing duels. Giving somebody the business will require you to have expert dodge button timing and a wary eye to spot dishonorable reinforcements hoping to snipe you or flank around and give you a spinal adjustment with their axe. Played on a respectable difficulty, these are sweaty experiences, even if you have an AI ally or you've used certain opportunities to weaponize the infected in your favor. Another fair warning, Naughty Dog also has this habit of tricking you into thinking that an area has been cleansed of all threats. Just as you begin the strip mining process, often involving the new traversal elements like climbing, jumping, and rope swinging, you'll unknowingly trigger a second wave of investigating hostiles. I personally love the lack of delineation between what a level is and isn't. It forces you to keep your ears pricked and your head on a swivel. Part 2 also expands the formula in terms of avatar evolution. Sniff out enough scratch and you can upgrade your eternally thirsty firearms at a workbench. Gobble down more pills than Pac-Man and you can perk Ellie up. You might want to focus on making a gunsling like John Wick. Be a formidable urban ninja who can disengage and re-establish stealth like a pro. Or maybe you just want to focus on being a weapon-producing MacGyver. It has to be said that the combat encounters are greatly enhanced by a few notable visual flourishes and a denser soundscape. The latter comes in the form of enemy chatter from a wide pool of voice actors. You'd be hard-pressed to find another game that has enemies that feel as human as these. For starters, and from the sound of all the wailing, every man and his dog, literally, seems to have a name and people who care about them.
Carrie! Fucking ambush! Think it came from back there! I got something. Bear smells something.
I mean, you're gonna do what you have to do to survive, but maybe expect to catch yourself wondering, every once in a while, about little Timmy NPC, waiting at home somewhere, possibly outside the map. You've just deprived him of an AI father named Sean, and a pet Alsatian called Alice. You inhuman monster.
He might have something. What you smell, boy?
Christ!
Now obviously this sequel looks much better. The Last of Us Remastered was, after all, a gussied up PS3 title. The attention to detail in the models here are insane, and Naughty Dog's environmental artists regularly flex and succeed in selling this world as something vaster than it is. The true triumph, however, has to be the motion matching animation system that tricks your eye into thinking that a 20-minute combat encounter has been mocapped by wetsuited actors on a capture stage somewhere, from start to finish. For starters, Ellie's movements flow naturally between attitude-adjusting people, traversing, equipping items, sliding out of water and into stealth, holding people hostage, shanking them, and then back again. The tech really comes into its own when you're trying to gauge an enemy's intent as they patrol. There are next to no tell moments, which signify when one of their behaviours ends and another begins. Enemies also love to twist their eye lines as they snoop, and even turn sometimes to walk backwards for a few steps, just to stop you from giving their kidneys a stab. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention the increased emotions the animators have brought to the table. Christopher Nolan's Joker once famously said that he uses a knife because it lets him savour the little details, because people show you who they truly are in their final moments. Set this game to half speed with the slow-mo option, and watch in impressed horror, as that statement rings absolutely true. So yeah, I mean, clearly the actual gameplay here is fantastic. Like an upgraded machete, it's the sharpest it's ever been. That said, is it enough to make you enjoy this overall package from start to finish? I honestly can't say, because this is a conversation piece of a sequel. The firefights are as brutal as they are challenging, the stealth is hold your breath stuff, and you'll always feel an absolute need to see Ellie's story through to whatever end awaits her. However, there is a good to fair chance that at some point you'll be forced into some emotionally challenging positions or be made to do things that you'll be resistant to. If you're not known for your ability to see the entirety of an argument, or perhaps your loyalties can just run a little too deep, there's gonna be some slow times where you may not even want to be at your controller, at least initially. I mean, I can tell you from this side of the credits that the juice is worth the squeeze in these moments, but I am expecting a wide variety of scores for Part 2 because of this. There are some very subjective moments here that players may learn to gel with after a period of adjustment. Some folks may not. Either way you look at it, this sequel I don't think is going to be a universal crowd pleaser like The Last of Us was. Ultimately, I came to love this game, even though I thought the pacing was a little messy, and unfortunately I can't really elaborate beyond that. What I can say is, if you tried what's here in novel form or as a TV season, I think it'd quite rightly be called a well-written story. But being a well-written one of those, and being a well-executed interactive experience are vastly different things. Without saying too much, Part 2 hopes to adjust your worldview on a few topics, to at least consider why, perhaps, something awful is being visited upon you before you respond with something arguably worse. That's an interesting human condition, worthy of exploration, but it's also really difficult to pull off in a video game. For the overwhelming majority of the time, I think Naughty Dog does achieve what it sets out to do, organically, impressively. Other times, very rarely in small throwaway moments, the manipulative efforts lack guile. Some strings are just too obviously seen, particularly in a few unskippable sections that rob you of full agency for a bit too long. So here we are then, full circle and back at that burning question. Is this a masterpiece? The The Last of Us Part 2 is a great game, a thrilling must-play, even. But as a primarily story-driven experience, it's a little too messy in places. Like many of you, when I put down my controller in 2013, I knew in my bones that I had witnessed something special. The 24-hour journey I took in Part 2 was also provocative and memorable, but the dismount didn't leave me with the same eureka moment. I have little doubt that this bottle still has lightning in it, to the point where I'm happily replaying the encounters and marveling at how fun they still are, but yeah, elsewhere, I think a few sparks have escaped. Maybe you'll like Part 2 more than me, maybe you'll wish The Last of Us should have stayed The Last of It. I'm predicting a wide range of critical reactions. It's going to be interesting to watch, and I hope that you found this video interesting to watch as well. I'm done with my thoughts. On the 19th, you can expect to see my full 24-hour 4K Survivor playthrough on the channel. It's a cold run through, and it's intense. Anyway, that's enough from me. Thanks for stopping by.